experience with the densely populated areas in Southeast Michigan, yes, Verizon as a user, on any network, you will have your choice of 2, 3, and possibly even 4 towers, no matter where you are standing in the Tri-County area. That's just how the networks are built.
Well, that's a relative term. People in Mount Clemens might think Mount Clemens is a busy metropolis, but people in New York or Detroit or Chicago might think Mount Clemens is just some hick little town. Is it based on population density?
It's based on the number of users that congregate in any area, the number of cellular users that are in any particular area at any particular time of day. So as I believe I mentioned earlier, while Mount Clemens after 6 o'clock may not contain very many people, Mount Clemens between 8 and 4, because it is a central business district, because it is the seat of the county, does have many more cellular users in the Mount Clemens area. The cellular networks know this because their phones are constantly reaching out to towers. So Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint will construct their network so that there are more towers in the central business district of Mount Clemens, in the central business district of Detroit, in the central business district of Pontiac, because there's more people there during the day.
But you don't know for a fact how many towers are physically located within the city of Mount Clemens?
Oh, the exact number? No, sir.
And you don't know where they are?
Not sitting here, no, sir.
Okay. And assuming there's 3, and all 3 are down, which is a remote possibility, is Mr. Cataldo left without phone service?
That is an extreme hypothetical situation.
Of course. But you're an expert, so we get to ask you hypothetical questions.
Based on, maybe a hurricane off of Lake St. Clair, if all 3 towers or his 3 closest towers were down, he could possibly then interact with a tower further away, outside of the ring of his 3 closest towers.
Okay. A basic assumption that you make in doing all of these location calculations, you assume that the handset will connect with the closest in proximity tower.
No, sir.
You don't assume.
I don't. I testified earlier that a phone looks for signal strength and signal quality. That most often is the closest tower, but not necessarily the closest tower. A phone looks for signal quality and signal strength.
So the signal strength is not always the closest tower physically?
The strongest signal and the highest quality signal is not always the closest tower.
Okay. When you were testifying or answering Mr. Cataldo's questions, I heard you use phrases like likely, more than likely, and AT&T estimates.
Yes, sir.
This calculation that you do in your field of expertise, it's clearly not an exact science.
In what way?
In the same vein that arithmetic is an exact science, where 2 plus 2 is always 4.
Correct.
And measures of volume are always the same because we define those things. But in your field, you're making a lot of calculated, educated guesses. Is that correct?
And I think I can answer your question this way. If we could throw up one of the maps with the cell sectors in it.
Let's do that. Let's put up, how about 105?
Okay.
Oh, you can step down if you like.
All right. So when you're talking about the, not an exact science, this is AT&T's estimate for where that handset was located on January 30th at 2:41 p.m. They provide us with a GPS coordinate and then give us a margin of error of 600 meters. So we can, according to AT&T's records, this phone is located somewhere in this 600-meter area. I can't say that it's exactly on the southeast corner of Arlington and Fredmore Highway, that it's more towards McKinley, that it's on the south side of Fredmore, on the north side of Fredmore, just that it's in the 600-meter area. So when we talk about the imprecision, that's where the plus or minus comes in.
And we know from your prior testimony that those lines are not hard lines because waves continue.
Well, this isn't a cell sector. This is just that margin of error around AT&T's estimate. So if we go to one of the cell sectors, please, sir. And what
Well, before we leave this exhibit,
okay.
Where is the cell tower location on this graphic? Where's the nearest cell or base transmission station?
Yeah, I do not have the towers plotted on this map, so I would not know standing here where those towers are located.
And what is that red smudge right in the center of that circle?
Again,
Or dot?
the dot is AT&T's estimate for where the handset was on January 30th at 2:41 p.m.
And what is that reference that says confidence :7? What does that signify?
That is the margin of error that AT&T provides us, and their 7 code is equivalent to 600 meters.
Okay, so it's not a scale. 1 to 10, we have confidence of 7. It's indicative of the meters.
Sure, it's indicative of the meters, but then a 5 is fewer meters than a 7. So I guess your scenario.
So the lower the number, the more confident they are in their estimate.
That is correct, sir.
Okay. You wanted another graphic up there?
Just of the cell towers, if we were going to get it, you mentioned the straight lines.
How about with Council Submission 108? That one?
Sure. Outstanding. So these are 2 cell sectors that Donna Scrivo's phone interacted with on January 30th. Again, we are in the area of Gratiot Avenue and 16 Mile. So according to AT&T, this is the broadcast area of this sector coming off of this cell site or cell tower. This is the area that they have designated shall be serviced by this cell site. However, because it is radio frequency, this by no means is the finite RF footprint for that coverage area. It would, if I were to actually go out and measure it, it would be more of a blob, misshapen thing, but it would still be service or represent this area to the west of Gratiot and mostly to the south of 16 Mile, but it wouldn't have these clean lines like their dimensions do.
Yeah, there's 2 red dots. Again, tell me what those are.
The red dots are further estimates of their NELO system for the location of Donna Scrivo's phone at 3:35 p.m. and at 3:42 p.m.
And who placed those? I'm sorry, go ahead. Finish.
On January 30th, 2014.
Who would have placed those red dots on this graphic?
Well, I put the dots on the map, if that's what you're asking.
Okay, so you interpreted some data you got from AT&T, and based on your interpretation and your judgment and your expertise, you placed those red dots.
Yes, using the GPS coordinates provided by AT&T, I plotted the GPS coordinates onto the map.
And that's your estimate of where the handset was at the time of that call based on the data that AT&T gave you?
This is my representation of AT&T's estimate.
Okay.
Okay?
Would you describe for the jury what we're looking at here?
So again, these are just additional dots or estimates of the NELOS report from AT&T for the location of Ramsey Scrivo's phone from January 18th, 2014 to January 31st of 2014.
And all the red dots we're looking at on this graphic, you placed them?
Yes, sir, based on AT&T's estimate.
And I see most of the dots are populated around the Jefferson Avenue 11-mile and Jefferson Avenue 9-mile areas.
That's correct, sir. Here's Jefferson running along the water, and then here's 11 miles, 696, and here's 9 mile, and that's where they seem to be congregated, yes.
And you're confident that you got all the dots where they're supposed to be?
I'm sorry?
You're fairly confident that in placing these dots, you accurately analyzed the AT&T data?
The GPS, yeah, again, with their margin of error.
Why do there seem to be 4 dots out in toward the center of the lake?
Right, I wasn't making, or I doubt AT&T is making the assumption that they're ice fishing, but that, again, that with that margin of error, and their margin of error can be up to 2,500 meters, then certainly that's what those dots would represent.
So with all the science and all of the NELOS and all of the Penlink software, we have, it looks like 4 instances where in the middle of January, this gentleman was out on the lake.
It most certainly, and I think I touched on it in my direct testimony, it certainly doesn't represent all of the science, because AT&T can make an exact, not even estimate, but they can determine exactly where we are standing. They just don't make that available to law enforcement. So when you're watching CSI or NCIS and you see Mark Harmon standing at the screen and they're watching the blue ball go down the street, not so much. They do not make that information available to law enforcement. What they do is they give us approximations with margins of error. It is that approximation that leaves us with the dots out in the lake on January 30th out in the middle of Lake St. Clair. Because they do not give us that precise location information, we are left with, as Mr. Cataldo and I spoke of, we are left with only being able to specify an area that that phone was in. Not that Stan is standing right in front of the TV. Stan is somewhere in downtown Mount Clemens. This phone was somewhere around Jefferson and 11 Mile. It's put it in the middle of the lake because of that margin of error. So it is not all of the science that is represented. They just don't provide us with all of the science.
And so we have to guesstimate.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Now, does your computer program, does it take into account those factors you talked about, like tower load and obstructions and foliage on the trees and solar flares and weather and those kinds of variables?
The information that we are provided, that I am provided, is what tower and what sector the phone interacted with.
Okay, so you're not provided all those other variables that might be important in making the calculation.
Oh, even the cell phone companies. I mean, the coverage area, that RF signal is a living animal. It ebbs and flows and changes constantly.
What are you familiar with the term enhanced 911?
Yes, sir.
That was enacted by the U.S. Congress several years ago.
Yes, sir.
It mandated that all cell phone companies put a GPS chip in their phone.
That is correct, sir.
That's so that when a person calls 911, responders will know exactly where that person is within a few meters.
That is correct, sir.
And that's based on the satellite GPS technology.
That is correct, sir.
That's very exacting.
That is correct, sir.
Unlike this, which we have to guesstimate and make assumptions.
Two statements that you made there is, one, enhanced 911, so there has to be an active, legitimate 911 call, and two, Congress mandated. So until Congress mandates that they provide law enforcement with the historical accuracy, this is what we're left with.
Because Congress didn't want first responders looking for someone out in the middle of the lake. That's why they enacted the enhanced 911, correct?
This is a historical report. That's different than the lifetime E911 that first responders get.
They get it now since Congress has mandated it, I agree.
Well, they better get it, yeah, because Congress has mandated it.
Congress knew this was too inaccurate to rely on by first emergency responders.
Inaccurate as to he's at 11th Street and not 12th Street, absolutely.
Yes.
For first responders, that is very relevant material.
What? You've been talking about handsets and Mr. Cataldo's Verizon phone. The Verizon system is what's known as handset specific, correct?
Okay, sir.
You know that?
I'm not familiar with that term.
Okay. Verizon phones don't come with a SIM card. Are you aware of that?
Some of them do not. No, sir.
The Verizon system uses a system called Code Division Multiple Access, CDMA.
CDMA. Some of them do not have SIM cards.
You don't have a SIM card.
I have a SIM card in my Verizon phone.
Is that because you use a different network?
It's a Verizon phone on the Verizon network. Some of them have a SIM card. So,
all AT&T phones use a SIM card.
yes, sir.
And you're aware that Mrs. Scrivo's phone is an AT&T based phone and it comes with a SIM card.
That is correct, sir.
It can't be operated as a telephone without that SIM card.
It could be operated as a phone with really any SIM card, but it wouldn't operate
A
as...
SIM card.
It needs a SIM card,
It
yes,
needs
sir.
a SIM card. The AT&T system is called GSM.
Correct.
You know what those initials are?
Not the entire acronym,
Okay.
no.
The data you get from AT&T regarding calls and locations and texts, that's SIM card specific, is it not?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So when you were saying Mrs. Scrivo's phone was here, Mrs. Scrivo's handset was there, you should have actually been saying Mrs. Scrivo's SIM card was in this approximate location, or Mrs. Scrivo's SIM card is responsible for receiving this call or making this call, correct?
Or the phone Mrs. Scrivo was using, yes. However you want to... Sure.
Okay, but hold on. I have an AT&T phone in my pocket.
Mm-hmm.
If I trade SIM cards with Mrs. Scrivo and start making calls, AT&T will believe that Mrs. Scrivo is making those calls, correct?
That is correct.
And all the data that you get from them will be reflective of calls that they attribute to her phone, but which actually I'm making from my phone.
That is correct.
Okay. That's what I meant when I asked you if you knew that AT&T was SIM card specific.
That is correct.
All right. So it's not really accurate to say her handset was in this location or her handset made these calls. You can only say her SIM card is responsible for this data or that data.
Okay.
Okay?
Her SIM card was
We
responsible
agree.
for that data. Absolutely.
And you have not examined her telephone or her handset.
No, sir.
All right. But you do know it's on the AT&T system.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Cataldo? Does the SIM card include a video image of a surveillance camera?
I'm sorry?
I'm no further.
All right, anything else, Mr. Haddad?
No, Your Honor.
All right, Agent, you may step down. You're
Thank you.
excused.
Thank you.
If I could, then we'll put the exhibit that Mr. Haddad shows in the original package, it's People's 112.
Okay.
It's, oh, you have one with a sticker?
I have,
No objection, I presume, Mr.
None.
Haddad? It will be received. Call your next witness, Mr. Cataldo. please. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please be seated. Give your name to the reporter, and spell your last name.
Carolyn Sloan, S-L-O-A-N. Thank you.
Okay, mind if I call you Carolyn?
No, it's fine.
You're really gonna have to keep your voice up.
Okay.
You have children?
Yes.
Okay, we need the I'm angry at my children depth.
Okay.
Thank you. What city do you live in, Carol?
St. Clair Shores.
And I would assume then, based on my other question, you are married and you do have children.
Yes.
Do you know Donna Scrivo?
Yes.
Would you point out where she is seated and an article of clothing that she's wearing?
She's sitting right there.
Keep your voice up, please.
She's sitting directly about 10 o'clock with a striped, black and white striped blazer on.
Ask the record to reflect the identification of the defendant, Donna Scrivo.
It shall.
How long have you known Donna?
Since I was about 22 years old.
Do you know Ramsey Scrivo?
Yes, I do.
And you knew that Ramsey was Donna's son?
Yes.
We're not going to go into the depth that we did with, is Allison your sister-in-law or your sister?
She's my sister.
I'm not going to go into the depth that we did with her, but I want to ask you some basic questions about Ramsey. Were you aware that Ramsey had some issues with anxiety?
Yes, about 2 years ago.
Again?
Yes.
Okay. I'd ask you to keep your voice up for me.
Okay.
How did you know that?
He seemed upset one day. He came by my house. And
Allison seemed to have a lot of interaction with Ramsey. How often, I guess, in the last 2 years, 3 years, 2011, 2012, 2013, did you interact with Ramsey?
Ramsey started to do lawn work. He started his own business. So he was cutting lawns at my sister's and my mom's, and I'm at their homes doing work and stuff, and we'd run into each other.
Would he do lawn service for you?
Yes, he did.
Did he do any interior work, any painting like that for you?
No. No.
We know, and we're using January 25th as the allegation date of his murder. Backing that up, when would the last time have been that you saw Ramsey?
Christmas Eve.
We saw a photograph earlier of a party. That was your son that was in the
Yes.
tall one, that was in the middle of the photograph? How did Ramsey seem to you at that party?
Very, very relaxed. He had been talking to my daughter and her husband. He told me he wanted to get back to doing lawns coming in the summer because it was a pretty tough winter. And I said I looked forward to that. I also wanted to have some work done in the front of my house, some railroad ties removed and do pavers. And I had mentioned it before to him, so I said, Ramsey, in the spring we're going to work on that. He goes, good. I look forward to it.
Did he talk to you at all about being depressed or about being suicidal, anything like that?
No, he never said that to me.
Did you know that he was on probation to the district court at that time?
Yes, I did.
There's been some testimony about him having, I guess, an issue with alcohol. Did you see that yourself?
I never saw him have a problem, or he really never drank at family events, so I never saw that.
Other than some times that you would run into him at family events or at other relatives' houses, did you really ever socialize with Ramsey?
No, just family events.
How was it, I guess, that you came to know that Ramsey was missing?
Donna called me on Sunday, maybe late afternoon, after I got back from my parents' home.
And that would have been January 26th?
Yes, whatever Sunday is.
You live in St. Clair, sure.
All rise, please.
All right, thank you. Please be seated. Recalling the matter of People versus Sale, file number 142392, FP.
Daniel Lewis on behalf of the plaintiff.
Samantha Pierce on behalf of Martin Bailey, who speaking tonight last time. All right, thank you. Good afternoon. So the court received another note from the jury, time 3:48, Mr. Bailiff. And this note reads, the jury has reached a verdict. All right. So, a couple things before we bring the jury in. Any media in the courtroom, remember the court's order, none of these jurors is to be captured on video or still camera, okay? So any photography or recording needs to say this side of the courtroom, not be anywhere near the jury box, okay? The other thing is I'm going to ask that people have no outward expressions of emotion. I know this is emotional on both sides of the room, but I'm going to ask if regardless of whatever the verdict is, if people can keep any reaction